All right, welcome everybody to our class today. This is our Tuesday weekly recurring class. So we try to shift the topic around and we try to cover as many different areas of self-direction as we possibly can, although I don't think there's enough weeks in a year for us to get to it all. So welcome to those of you live. Welcome to those of you online. Today we're going to talk about tax liens and tax deeds. Kind of a unique market, a unique opportunity, but we're going to talk about how these fit inside IRAs, which is pretty cool. Quick poll. Anyone here done tax liens personally?
Done what?
Any tax lien investing or tax deed investing?
No, I looked at it though. I've gone up to the auctions.
Okay, so we dabbled a little in it, but not pulled the trigger.
Right. I was doing flips at the time, and I didn't want to get into that area.
Wonderful.
But I just want to check it out again. I didn't really have good advice on it, so I didn't want to just jump into it on my own.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out what that next asset class and so we're going to talk today about a variety of things, and I'll start by saying, I guess it's good because it's our disclaimer slide. I'm not a financial advisor. NewView as a company, we are passive custodians, we're educators. Please don't rely on anything that we're providing today as any sort of legal, tax, or investment advice. We're here to share some guidance and ideas of what we see. A lot of that, what's pretty cool, is vicariously through our clients, right? So we get to see what they do and how they do it and why they do it. And so we're going to share, as much of that as we can with you guys to help, hopefully, just spark some interest in what opportunities are out there. As the world continues to shift and change, investments that may have fallen out of favor fall back into favor. So for those that aren't, terribly familiar with tax liens, when the market is humming along and everyone's doing great, tax liens usually aren't as attractive of an investment. There's not as many. Most people are paying their property taxes, that sort of thing. But as we start to see economic conditions deteriorate, whether it's a little or a lot, and we'll kind of see what that actually looks like whenever this economic cycle we're going through is completed, you start to see more deficiencies, more defaults. And as a result, right, you end up with opportunities in the tax lien world. So there's also some other conditions and pressures that are put on tax liens from an investment standpoint as well. We'll talk a bit about what that looks like. So we always kind of have a couple slides that are the same in every presentation for those that may be new, but understand that what we offer is a self-directed retirement account. That means that you choose every single solitary investment inside the plan. And more importantly, you're choosing from a list of all the permitted investments, not just the investments permitted by the custodian. And that's a big difference because you can self-direct your IRA at Schwab or Fidelity, but they will limit the permissible investments in their account. Nothing wrong with that. No different than McDonald's limits what's on their menu, right? At NewView, we don't limit choice. There's a few things that the IRS says you can't do, but pretty much everything else is fair game, which is why we talk a lot about real estate and notes and private equity, because those are all investments outside the market that are all permissible inside a retirement account. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, you don't do securities though that are listed.
Yeah, we're not in the business of public equities.
Even though you have a brokerage, even though you have a brokerage.
We can do brokerage on a small scale in certain scenarios, right? But you wouldn't come to us to trade stocks. The reason I say it that way is if you're looking to trade stocks, go to someone that trades stocks, right? If you're looking to buy a mutual fund here and there, or do something that's same day, meaning you don't care if the trade's executed 11 a.m. or 4 p.m., then we can assist. But if your goal is to purchase equities regularly or buy and sell them, it's not a bad thing. We're not in that business.
But I was looking for a place to put idle cash.
Sure.
And I think you do it, you just don't have the same, you can't buy some of the deals that are the best, like Schwab money markets that are paying about 5% now.
Yeah, we've got it. As far as what equities are available, it's a pretty...
It's bigger than about a year ago.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized amount, but you'll probably want to talk to someone on our brokerage team. Yeah, they can walk you through that. The key takeaway on brokerage is that, as a custodian, we're not a broker. right? We're not a brokerage firm. We don't have brokerage services, but we do have a group we work through where we can trade public equities, right? But whether we have access to everything available, we'll have to look at that offline. So why are people self-directing? Well, diversification, tax savings, invest in what you know best. I mean, those are the three biggest reasons. Today, we're going to talk about diversification. That's really what this is. This is another asset class that's very similar. It's still a real estate related investment, but what it does is provide you diversification. You're on the other end of the real estate transaction, right? And we're talking about some of the reasons why that's a powerful tool. Now, diversification is great in self-direction because diversification is often considered different asset classes, right? All right, if you're going to diversify, you buy some stocks in medical, you buy some stocks in tech, you buy some stocks in X. And what I think we've all seen is all boats seem to rise and fall in a rising and lowering tide, right? So yes, there are some winners and losers, but overall, what diversification does for you in real estate and alternative assets, it gives you the ability to truly diversify. Really to diversify without having to go buy assets you don't understand. So for example, diversity could be buying single family, multifamily, and office. All real estate, right? So I don't have to get out of my way in real estate understanding and logic, but I'm buying into asset classes that are significantly different. I can also diversify geographically, right? I could buy a piece of real estate here in Florida, as well as I could buy a piece of real estate in anywhere that someone, outside of Florida may be joining us from. And those markets don't always go work together, right? Sometimes they work in different manners. One goes up while one may be going down. Tax savings. Biggest benefit, in my opinion, of self-direction is the tax benefits. Because when you think about the value of tax savings, it's the difference between making money and building wealth, right? Anyone with a sizable portfolio, anyone that's considered wealthy, 9 out of 10 times is winning that game too. Because if you keep more of what you make, you have more to invest, more to make, and it's so compounding, right? Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest is incredible. If you're unfamiliar with it, take some time to really understand it. And then this last one, what you know best, right? How do you understand it? How does it work? What's the value? And why would you want to do it? Now, if I look at the market, right, and there's nothing wrong with buying public equities at all. There's a lot of people that do it and do it successfully. The challenge that I see with it for most mainstream folks is that we don't have the time, knowledge, or effort to go out and really figure out what makes these move. And just when you think you do, right? I mean, I remember coming out of college back in early 2000, price equity, right? What's the price? What's the equity? What's that PE ratio? How does that look? And you're looking for companies trading on lower PE equities, right? Or undervalued. So if the average, PE was 10 for, let's say, a tech firm, and you found some at 7 and 8, right? That's how you define value. Today, nearly half the companies traded have a negative PE ratio. So here, just fast forward 15, 20 years, and everything, all this knowledge base that I built up is no longer valid. So now you can see stocks that have not earned any actual money, right, trading at significant premiums. Well, it's hard to understand as an investor, how do I find value? Yet I can turn into the real estate market all day long and I can see where value is. And we're going to talk about tax liens as an offshoot of real estate, but it's still a real estate investment, which is pretty cool. These are the plan types. I'm not going to go through these. The reason that I really want to make sure we highlight this today is that there are a lot of accounts that people think they can't self-direct, right? So I hear people say, well, I've got an HSA with $7,000 in it, but I don't have enough money to self-direct. Well, the reality is you can self-direct any account. And today's topic plays very well into lower balance accounts, because I can go buy one $2,000 tax lien in my ESA for my son. I can go buy one $4,000 tax lien in an HSA, right? They come in smaller denominations, which allows me to utilize these accounts in a different manner. Tax liens generally don't cause you any issues at all from a prohibited transaction standpoint, but just know anytime you buy in a self-directed IRA, you have to be careful of no life insurance, and then the behavior of your transactions has to always be arm's length, right? If you're ever buying for any reason other than the true investment arm's length value, it's prohibited. And if you ever try to do business with very close family members, right? Your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, likely to be prohibited as well. So just keep that arm's length as you're navigating. So let's talk about tax liens. Tax liens are very interesting because they actually represent unpaid taxes by some third party on a piece of property. Now, you would be amazed if you saw a listing of some of the names on tax liens. And I've been to some presentations where they're heavily involved in tax liens, and you'd be amazed at some of the celebrities and people that actually have tax liens filed. And you'd think, well, this is a $14,000 tax lien. This is a millionaire. What people don't realize is just because you're a millionaire, A, doesn't mean you have liquidity, and sometimes people run into cash problems. Two, they may just have forgot to pay it. It very well could be any or all of the above. So you will never, you never know what you're going to see when sifting through tax liens. But tax liens represent a payment. So if you think about how a municipality works, the municipality says we have 1,000 parcels in our jurisdiction, right? The average market value is X. The millage rate, which is the rate at which property taxes are calculated, against that says that we're going to bring in $100 million of revenue from tax liens or from tax charges. They know that. So they set their budget saying that based on all the properties and all the owned properties, this is how much we can expect to earn. Well, if 10% of people don't pay that, the government can't just run without 10% of the money, right? So the way that they bridge that gap is they sell the tax liens to bring in the money into their operational budget. And the lien part of the tax lien goes against the property, and the property owner has to satisfy that lien or else. And we'll talk about what or else is, but at a minimum, when the property's sold, it's encumbered and it can't be sold till that lien is satisfied. And an interest is applied for whomever buys that, paid by the property owner. So if you think about it, it works great for the county, right? Because the county sells off the tax liens. It costs them nothing. They get their full value for the tax lien. And then whenever there's a true up by the seller, or in this case, the property owner, right? When they sell it, they true up directly with the buyer of this tax lien. Now, you can't use the word guarantee because there's no guarantee in anything, but tax liens have proven to be one of the most guaranteed levels of actually happening what is expected to happen. Now, you can buy tax liens on property nobody wants, so you have to be careful. There's no guarantee, but there is a guarantee that you have a lien. There is a guarantee that when that property is sold or anything happens, that lien has to be satisfied first, right? Now, what you don't know, what you want to make sure is the property worth the tax lien, and there's some things we're going to talk about here in a second. But the way that it works is it's unpaid property taxes, and the bidding actually works, and I'm speaking for a majority of states. Some states are different. There are different laws, so please note you may reside in a state that works different. But it starts at 18% and goes backwards. So what they say is we will sell this tax lien to the lowest bidder starting at 18%. Well, if nobody bids, what do you get that tax lien at? 18%. But if I bid 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, and what's happened, and the reason that you saw a lot of people get out of tax liens is that large institutions started going to these big tax lien auctions, and they moved a lot to online, and they're coming in and bidding these down to 5 and 6%. Because in their eyes, that's still a great return, and because the rate of success on the right properties is in the high 90s, they didn't have to worry about loss of principal. So it was almost like, if you think about it, now we know that interest rates allow us to go out and get money market rates at 5%. But 3 years ago, you can get a money market rate at 5%. But if you get a tax lien at 3%, it was as close to that government-backed money market that you could get. Make sense? The interest accrues until taxes are paid, right? So the interest accrues until taxes are paid. So in some ways, it's almost like you buy something and hope that they don't pay you for a while, right?
What's the interest rate?
Whatever you bid.
Whatever you bid.
Oh, okay.
They vary from lien to lien. Literally every single lien, it has its own predetermined interest rate.
So it's 18 down.
18 down. And so I could get, if I went and bid, and I wanted to invest, let's just say 50 grand, and the average tax lien is 4 grand, right? I'm going to end up with 12 or 13 tax liens. And I could have a 12, a 2, a 9, a 4, a 7, right? And the better quality properties tend to, obviously, people are willing to bid them down. But there are a lot of properties that you have to take good looks at. I mean, some of these properties could be abandoned. They could be decrepit. There could be, so in the disrepair, there could be a ton of liens on it that would mean no one wants to buy it, right? There's a lot of things you just want to look for. And that's part of your research. You should not just go blindly buy tax liens unless you were prepared to, give away whatever the percentage of loss. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're buying them at a certain percentage. But typically they're bought individually, they're auctioned individually. So you're looking, saying, okay, 123 Main Street, it's a $450,000 assessed value home. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, right? Maybe you pulled it up on Google Earth. It looks like it's in really good shape. You go to the county's website, you see there's no other liens attached to it. So you can go do a few of these things to do a little bit of research. And if the property meets that criteria, then you can go bid on it. But being that it starts at a negative bid rate, people are going to bid down properties that they think have the highest likelihood of changing hands without any question, because that's ultimately what you want. Now, certainly the seller at any point could pay it. And I say the seller, I'm so sorry, the property owner, right? We just see a lot of these paid at sale. But yeah, the property owner could turn around tomorrow and go, oops, I didn't pay my property taxes. I forgot. Let me pay it. Because they're going to be notified. They don't want to be waiting at 18% interest or 14% interest, because they're on the hook for that. So you want these things paid off, right? So it's that balance, right? You want them to hold it for a decent amount of time, but most of these will pay off. You can get a payoff any day on a tax lien, literally any day. You have that senior lien position. The thing that a lot of people do like is that you can convert them to a tax deed, right? So I think it's the second year in Florida, there's a time horizon that you own a tax lien, you can convert it to tax deed. Once it's at a tax deed, then you can force a tax deed sale. Right? So there are some things that you can do even if the person doesn't pay and decides they're never going to pay. You can force the sale through a tax deed. So this is where people say, I got the property, right? That's the process that they went through to get there. But that's the process. Right? So it's kind of like a backstop. Right? You're basically taking a lien that says you owe me X and I'm holding your property hostage to, I can now force potentially liquidation of your property to satisfy my lien. But what you want to make sure, and this is part of the tax lien process, is you want to understand who gets paid and where do you stand in that lien stack. Right? Questions on this? So how do you buy a tax lien? Well, and again, this varies by municipality, but a lot of them now have gone online, right? Which is really nice because you put your money into, an online account, you buy, and then you have the money there. So it's become a digital process. This is, I kind of joke, this is like remote work if you're an employee, right? So what I mean by that is you can beg for remote work. But if so, it means that now the entire world can apply for the same job. You make the pool bigger. Kind of the same thing here. People said, oh man, I really, these things should be online, which is great. The problem is the whole world can now bid on tax liens. And when you're at a negative bidding rate, the more bidders means the more likely that the price is to get bid down. So I have some clients that they hate online because they don't want to go bid against other people. And I have other people that love it because they can bid literally almost every day or at every county and every municipality. So it's a double-edged sword, right? You'll have more opportunity because you're no longer confined to the 3 or 4 counties that you're willing to go participate in live. But now everybody else has the same luxury.
You know which counties have what?
A quick search on any county. I think most of the major counties here in Florida are all online, so far as I
I
know.
think Orange is.
Yeah. I mean, I think and I personally about, I don't know, maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago, there was a lot of activity in tax liens, a lot. And I was far more involved at that time in terms of just being in the know. And a lot of at the time they were transitioning. It seemed like there was a company or two that created the software and then they were just licensing it to all the municipalities. So I would imagine, I'm assuming greater than 50% are online now. I would be shocked. But there's still some smaller municipalities that won't, which is where live auctions come in. Right? So live auctions are where you actually go in, you get your little paddle and you bid. Right? The thing that people really like about the live auctions is you pull the list of what's going to be auctioned off and it's almost like your homework, right? You can kind of pull the list and go through it. With online auctions. You can do the same thing, but you may be doing it over a whole lot more. And so the amount of homework you got to do may be much higher. But live auctions still do exist. It's conceptually the same, right? It's still bidding, but instead of bidding online, you're basically bidding with a paddle. Kind of funny story in college, I worked at a department store. One of the guys that I had worked with, he's like, I'm leaving. I got this new job. I'm like, oh, well, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm working for this big hedge fund and they're paying me a ton of money to just go to these different auctions in Florida. I'm like, what? I was so ignorant to this. I mean, I had no idea. And, but he was basically paid they would give him a list of all the auctions. They would give him a spreadsheet with the lowest interest rate they would take. And all he did was just go and he would do it like one day a week. He would go to the auctions. They would say, property number 1, he'd look, 8%. He'd bid till I got to 8%. He'd hit his paddle down and sit there. Property 4, oh, that's me. And he'd bid. And I just remember thinking, like, what the heck is he into? He was working here. And now he's only working like a day or two a week. Well, now it makes more sense because these hedge funds, they wanted to be at more auctions. So it was cheaper for them than flying and going through. So they had a team doing research at all these municipalities. They would simply send their data, set over to someone in the market, and they'd say, "Here you go," and they'd be prepared with a blank check to buy whatever it was that the individual had bought. It's live auctions. These auctions for tax liens have been going on forever. It's just become more mainstream, right? Over the counter. So typically the way that works is auctions are predefined. So they would define that we are selling these 100 properties today, right? That's an auction. Out of those 100, if only 90 of them are purchased, the other 10 become over the counter. That means that you can go into the county and actually buy them in person, right? Now, I don't know how much it's changed, but you literally would go into like a book and you'd be able to see what was available. Over the counter naturally is the nice thing about over the counter, they're all at 18%.
I don't understand much the percentage. When you say 18 or less, maybe I don't know enough. I thought that you're guaranteed to make 18% profit.
No, so your return is going to be based on what you bid on and bought. So
Okay.
the question for those online was, how does that 18% work? So the way it works is that they will say, okay, property 123 Main Street, $4,000 property tax lien. The bidding starts at 18%. So someone puts up their paddle, right, or clicks the button, 18. The next person says, I'll take it for 17. The next person says, I'll take it for 16, 15, 14. It bids as low until there's no more bidders. So you only get what you committed and actually won the auction at. But that is an auction. You're not guaranteed to get the maximum for an auction. It's like selling something at auction. You're only going to get what the highest bidder is willing to pay.
So in that example, you're going to pay $4,000 to get that. The 18% is how much you want to make on that money. So they're starting at 18. You're going to pay $4,000 at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What you're going to get back is whatever you agreed to. I want 18%. Somebody bid 17. I'm going to back away. I want 18%. You may not ever get it.
Yeah, the owner just has to pay you that.
Right.
Yeah.
If and when
Yeah.
they try to sell it or find out that they forgot to pay the taxes, is my understanding. So the
That's
18%
exactly right.
is your return.
Well, the 18% is not your return. The return is defined at what percentage you bought the tax lien at.
Right.
18% is the
The starting
starting
number.
bid. But remember, it's a bid. And the 18% will be reduced by however many people are willing. So if you think about it, right, like this cup, right? I could say this is $20. But if that's where the bidding starts, it's only $20 if no one else bids. But if this starts at 20 and someone says, I'll give you 21, 22, 23, they're going to pay whatever the highest bidder is willing to pay. It's the same concept bidding in tax liens, except for you're bidding to make less return.
So with the one tax lien, can there be more than one buyer? Okay,
Nope. So if the tax lien is put up for auction and someone says, I will buy it at 6% and nobody else bids, they will buy it at 6%. That means that they're going to buy the lien for whatever the face value of the lien is. That doesn't change. And the return that the property owner owes them is 6% accruing from that point. If they bought it at 8, 10, 12, but you can't just pick your price. It's a bid. This is where market conditions, this is where tax liens are a challenge. Because if there's 100 people bidding, right, it's going to likely drop the bids down.
So you're not buying the property, you're only buying the lien, and that's all you're gonna get is whatever it is. You have nothing to do with the property at all.
Not unless you take it to tax deed.
Until you get the tax deed.
Yep. So you're not the property owner. You're not responsible for anything. Now, you can actually have, and there are properties where there are multiple years where different people own the tax liens. So, if someone defaulted in 2021's tax bill, I could buy that lien. 2022, you buy that lien. So there's nothing that says, like, we don't own it, you don't own it, I don't own it. It just means that I'm in a senior lien position alongside you.
how do you go to a tax deed?
After a certain amount of time, and it varies, you'll have to go research this on whatever counties or states you're looking at, but after a certain amount of time, you can apply to convert your tax lien into a tax deed. Once you have the tax deed, my understanding, and again, it's somewhat limited because there's so many different states, at that point, you can begin the process to foreclose or sell, for sale of the property.
So in that case, the people that have second liens, like on the 2021, when you have a 2020, if you convert it to a tax deed in 2021, they're out. I mean, you own the property now.
No. So the question is, all these subordinate liens, can you just own the property? Just because I have a lien doesn't mean I take the right to own the property.
You have a tax deed, you have a tax deed.
When I have a tax deed, there still has to be other liens that may need to be satisfied. Just because I'm first in line doesn't mean nobody else is in line. What it means typically is that I can force the sale of the property to satisfy the liens outstanding. Now, the good news is if you're in first position and you're owed $5,000 and you sell the property for $6,000, you get your $5,000, and there's only $1,000 left for whoever's behind you, right? So that's how liens work. It's like a capital stack. But yeah, you cannot just take a tax deed and say, I now am the rightful owner of the property, because all the other lien holders are saying, hey, it doesn't work that way. But you can ultimately end up owning the property, but you would basically go bid on it yourself. And then you would buy it for the tax deed price, and you would pay off the liens associated with that. But liens go in order, right? And it's not always order of date. It's order of type of lien, right? So a tax lien is a senior position, but there can be other senior positions. So this is where you want to be careful with tax liens, to assume that if I own the tax lien, I'll always get paid, right? Because if there's mortgages on that property, a first mortgage, you're in competition. Those are considered senior liens as well. So you'd want to make sure that the property had enough value in the event of a tax deed sale or foreclosure for the lien to be satisfied. A lot of times, and again, I'm only speaking to what my understanding is, I'm far from an expert in the fine details, but that what happens a lot of times is that a lot of tax liens, if they're just completely going unpaid, they're paid off through foreclosure sale. Because I got a $4,000 tax lien. the bank has a $200,000 first mortgage. They're going to be far more aggressive in pursuing that property, and they also have a lot more expeditious access to it than I do. Right? And that's not a bad thing. Honestly, in a perfect world, if I could pick the best lien I'd want to own, I'd want to own a tax lien that had a mortgage on it, that wasn't so big that it could chew up all the money, and I want the mortgage company to eventually go foreclose. That's what I want. Because that process takes a couple of years. They foreclose. They're going to have all the legal resources needed to make it all happen. It costs me zero as the lien owner, right? And then what are they going to do after they foreclose? Banks don't own real estate. What are they going to do? Liquidate the real estate. Well, to go through the foreclosure process and liquidation, guess what they have to do? Clear off applicable liens, which is neat, right? So in a perfect world, that's what I want. Now, what I don't want is to be standing in line behind a bank who's got a huge mortgage on a property not worth much, because I'm not elbowing my way too far to the front of the line.
So if it's a good deal for you that you want to invest, do you have the first opportunity to buy from the foreclosure? That's what blows my mind.
Yeah, so when you say first opportunity, do you have the opportunity? Yes, you're going to be in the know, but unless the bank wants to just sell it to you directly, but typically the bank's going to go to market.
Yeah, I don't think tax liens are an efficient way to try and buy property.
But you see so many listings of raggedy houses found too in Sanford that say property was from a tax lien.
Mhm.
Owner has never been in there. It was trashy, but it was good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it
how did they
happens.
get it? How did they
It
get
happens
those houses?
because it's being sold. Keep in mind that they don't have the house. I think what we're kind of talking through here is it's actual ownership of the house. If there's a property being listed for sale through tax deed sale, they're looking for buyers to come in and put in money to satisfy all the liens. That's what they're looking for. And the county is the one that's going through that process typically. So there is a process. Now, it could be the bank that's doing it. The bank has the foreclosure. It could be a variety of things. But yeah, I mean, what you're trying to do is you get paid in a tax lien. Your backstop of getting paid is when the property sells, right? Because if the property doesn't sell and I have a tax lien, there's nothing forcing the owner to pay me. Now, they're incentivized to pay me because they turn the interest off. But in reality, I live in a house and I've not paid my taxes. I'm not under any new obligation. Like, there's no obligation for me to pay. No more so than the day I should have paid it. So typically, either I forgot to pay them, didn't have the cash. Those people will pay their tax liens. They don't want to lose their house. They don't want to go into foreclosure. Those people, for whatever reason, and it could be a short-term problem, it could be a long-term problem, but they want to pay the tax lien. But for a lot of these other tax liens, like and it seems absurd to me when I first got into this many years ago. I was like, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. But when you kind of understand the way the world works, it does make sense. People, there are properties that are inherited. There are properties that someone owned for many years and they pass away. Nobody knows. And it may sit vacant for 5 years. And God only knows the condition. It's deteriorating and all that. So the heirs may not even know they own the property. It seems crazy. It happens all the time.
I'm involved in one right now.
Yeah.
When my parents passed, my dad was partners with 5 other people. So all the original people have passed. Now it's just the kids and the grandkids. What are we going to do with this piece of property? Go to real estate, what's it worth? $75,000. Well, somebody else in the group says, well, I think we could get $400,000 for it. So they don't want to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on real estate for $400,000, wait a year, nobody makes an offer. Well, obviously it's not worth $400,000. Let's drop it down to 300 or 200. And it's because of inheritance. Now there's 5 families involved. There's 3 kids in this family and 5 kids in that one. And
yeah,
it's a mess. And it just takes a long time to get everybody to a point where they'll agree.
Yep. And you have properties where people pass away and nobody knows who the next of kin is. Nobody knows who the rightful owner is through probate. So, I mean, you have so many scenarios with real estate, and then you have abandoned stuff. I mean, drive around, look at some of these properties, and you're like, there's cars there, like people live there, and the house is in shambles. Like, and they let it go, and it does happen. So as a result of that, taxes go unpaid. And what you end up with is an opportunity to be an investor on that unpaid tax. The risks that you run are the condition of the property, the saleability of the property. So ultimately, you have to kind of figure out what your exit. You know your entrance. Go bid, own the tax lien, but your exit is payoff. So either the homeowner is going to pay you, the homeowner is going to sell it in the retail market, meaning they're just going to put the house for sale and it'll get paid if they have equity, or they're going to let it go to a point where the bank's going to step in and foreclose in hopes that you'll be able to get paid through that process. Or in more extreme examples, right, the property sits dormant for a long period of time and you end up having to enact, in effect, some sort of for sale. And there's some of these properties don't even have mortgages, so I think property does cycle out over time, right? It goes from an A property to a B to a C to a D. And if there's no repairs done to make it go from B to A or C to B, it will eventually deteriorate. And once it gets to a point of deterioration, it's almost like that property is best knocked down, right? So you just have to make sure that you understand what you're bidding on. You can also bid on property that is parcel, but maybe an easement, or may have constrained access to the property. That can happen, right? So, you see this 12-acre tract of land, you're like, this is great, 12 acres for 50 grand. Well, then you realize, good luck getting to it. I used to live in a neighborhood here in Central Florida. Exact same thing happened. The very back of our neighborhood has 2 houses that were built about 10 years after every other house in the development. Well, as I moved in and got to understand it, the original homeowner or builder left those 2 open in agreement with the property owner that owned the property behind it. Well, once they sell a certain number of homes, it turns over the HOA. The HOA voted and said, we don't want the back of our neighborhood to be a drive-through to another 50-house neighborhood. And so they said no. So there went one access point. When they finally agreed on that, they sold the 2 properties and built 2 homes. So now that property lost its easement from the north. On the west side of the property, there's another access point. That road is owned. It's an easement amongst 5 homeowners, right? It's their property. They agreed to create an easement for the 5 homes that were on that property. The very end of the road, you literally drive off their dirt road and you can go, and we've done this and you're in this property. But guess what? They don't want to open it up because they don't want the traffic running through their yards. So this piece of real estate now is worthless. Now, I don't know if maybe one of the adjoining people would buy it or something, but it's literally worthless. What's really interesting about it is if you go back there are actually some infrastructure they started putting in, thinking that they had this easement was going to be granted. Now, do you think when they realized that there was no easement going to be granted, what do you think they stopped paying? Property taxes. Because I guarantee its assessed value was a whole lot higher than what it's worth. So here's where you got to be careful. You may think, oh, this is a $15,000 or $18,000 tax lien on a 12-acre plot of land right in the heart of one of the most desirable cities in Central Florida. I'm buying this all day long. Well, you may now be at $12,000, and you may have a deed or a lien that can turn into a deed that can turn into the property and not have a single bidder, because nobody's going to want to go bid. Right? So these are the things, and I'm not scaring you away from it, but I'm a big believer that when you look at investment, understand the downside. The upside will always find its way, right? If you protect the downside. So those are the things when you're looking at tax liens that you just want to make sure you're looking at. And you can research this stuff so easily today. So easily today. I mean, go onto Zillow. I've looked the property up, zoom in, you'll see the lines around it. You'll see there's no road. So those are some of the things that you can do. I mean, you can go onto Zillow and look at properties all day long. You can see, are they in communities? What type of communities are they in? Are these out in the middle of nowhere? Are they on city streets? Are there HOAs? If there's HOA, call the HOA. Right? There are lots of things that you can do. I mean, you don't think that president of the HOA, if there's a house that's behind on their taxes and other things, would love for someone to buy it? They'd love to know that it's going to see the light of day. So, you know, what a great call. Hey, I'm calling about property 123 Main Street. Can you tell me what type of condition it is? I don't live in the area. Okay? So there's a lot of things that you can do generally to do some research. I know people that put a price, they literally have a floor and a ceiling, right? Now, they look and say, okay, we only look at tax liens between $4,000 and $8,000. Their logic is that's the type of price point that usually represents a single family home that's not too big, that could have bigger issues. Like, I don't know if it's right or not, but then they go and they do their research and they go big, right? So any and all of these are permissible inside an IRA. You can do them all. Any questions? Those of you online, feel free to make sure, and I apologize for not telling you earlier, you can type your questions in. As we wrap up, we'll go through the list of questions on your end as well. So tax deeds represents the public auction of the property, right? So this is where we talked about when you get the tax, it's the actual sale it's the public sale of the property. And the purpose of that is because they want to be able to close out all the liens and get the property to change hands. It's forced sale. Some states only offer tax liens, only offer tax deeds. Hybrids, you need to learn and understand how it works in your particular state. That is something that we have no idea or logic and understanding of beyond what we hear from our clients. So this is where, going back, to some of the questions. So any of the overages, right? So whatever it's auctioned for above and beyond that lien is where other lien holders start to get in, right? That's where you start creating this opportunity. That's why you can't just take the property, right? Now, if no one else bids, yes, you can take the property. But if anyone else bids, then you can only take what you're owed, which would be your lien plus any accrued interest. But if I'm owed $6,000 and it sells at auction for 10, I get my 6, and whoever's next in line gets their 4. Right? And then some states have a redemption period for them to pay. There's a lot of, again, stipulations from state to state on how that works. A lot of mortgage companies will pay the tax liens because they want it out of the way, right? Because I believe the tax lien actually sits right above the mortgage. They want it out of the way, right? They've got $150,000, $250,000, $350,000 mortgage, not worried about the $4,000. They're worried about the rest of the money, right? So they want to get it paid and they want to get it out for sale as quickly and efficiently as possible. So in order to own tax liens in an IRA through NewView, and really of the places that'll even hold them, you've got to have a checkbook LLC. We used to hold them directly, and it's way too much administratively for both you as the IRA owner and for us. And the reason is most of the time you're buying a series of liens, right? We very rarely have a client that buys 1 lien or 2 liens. They may be putting $50,000 or $80,000 into it. As a result, there's tax rolls that come for, there's payments that come that aren't clear. So it's very hard for us to try to track it. And so we set them up through a checkbook LLC. That means that your IRA buys the shares of the LLC, and then you as the IRA owner manage that LLC to go make the purchases. You would go to interface directly with the county, whether you did it live, online, or in an auction. You would keep track of all the liens that you own. You would receive payment. You would check them all off, that sort of thing. If you need to apply for tax deed or go through that process, you would. But it creates speed and efficiency through that process. Like I said, we've done this ourselves in the past. And for a handful of clients it works, but when you get the volume, it's very labor intensive for everybody. And so we only hold them through the checkbook LLC going forward. The only thing that we need at the end of each year is just that annual reporting, right? What is the fair market value of what that LLC holds? So if it holds 40 liens and the total of the sum of the liens and outstanding interest is 85 grand, that's all we need. I don't need to know all the liens and all the interest rates. That's all kept and held specifically and directly inside the IRA. Questions on that? And our team can kind of walk you through what that LLC model looks like if that's something you were looking to do. So next steps, you can scan the QR screen on your QR code on your screen. If you want to move forward in any possible way, those of you that are already clients, we can certainly set you up with our purchases team on kind of how that looks, how the LLC works, and walk you through the mechanics. If you're not a client, the QR code is the best thing to scan. It's going to put you into our system and also allow us to get some info over to you. Obviously, next steps are getting set up. Whether it's setting up your account, then setting up your LLC, or whether it's setting up your LLC because you've already got the account, either way. But it's all about progressing to the point of being able to make your investment. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I will pause there. I know we took some questions from our internal audience, but we've got Maggie in the back and she looks ready to read out some of our online questions. So.
All right, so first question, do you have to own the lien in the state that you live in?
Great question. My understanding is no across all 50 states, but I don't know if any state has a unique guideline for that, but my understanding is no. But confirm and validate that through the state.
Awesome. Next question is a two-part question. What happens if the owner never pays? Does the property then become collateral?
Yeah, so let me read that out. I should have done that for the last one. What happens if the property owner doesn't pay? I may have already answered this, but it's worth reiterating. If the property owner doesn't pay, right, then either you, as a tax lien holder, after a certain amount of time based on the state that you're in, could apply to move it to tax deed and force public auction. That would be one. But yes, the property is always your collateral from the day you buy it, right? Now, like any collateral, it's no different in a loan. You want to make sure the collateral is worth more than the property or than the lien, right? So in the event that they don't pay, at the sale of that property, whether it's forced by you or it occurs by some other means, then you're a lien holder and that property cannot legally change hands without a payoff of that loan. And that's the beauty of title insurance.
Past history, does that happen very often?
Does what?
The owner not paying eventually?
There are hundreds of thousands of tax liens. If I had to guess, and this is just venturing a guess, I'd say probably 50% the owner pays. Because there's so many that are just, they're a little delinquent, but it's not a true delinquency. I'm using 50% to just split the difference down the middle, but I do know, and I do know that there are properties without question that will go into forced sale, whether it's forced sale by the bank or other lien holder, or whether it's tax deed on your end, but that does happen as well.
If you're delinquent on your taxes, how long do you have before the governing body puts your lien out for sale?
Great question. And if you're delinquent on your taxes, how long do you have before action will likely be taken by any of the lien holders? The funny part is, depends. Because if no one takes any action, just because a bank can foreclose doesn't mean they will. Right? And so now most banks are all pretty good, but if you rewind the tape back to 2007 and 8, I mean, you had people in their houses for 5 and 7 years before anything ever happened. Nobody wanted to even go to tax deed sale because there was so many headaches. So, as far as what's the appropriate amount of time, I would imagine a couple of years, because at some point, either you're going to be able to go through the tax deed sale, and I believe it's 2 years, like following the date of purchase on a certain calendar day, right? You would be the one that could execute that on your own end. What you'd hope for likely is that some other lien holder stepped in front of you, right? I mean, you want foreclosure on the real estate side. I mean, that's the best case scenario because they're going to pay your lien off. right? Because they want to get your lien out of the way so they can go get the rest of their money.
Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions internally or any other questions from those of you guys online? Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for joining us online. We'll look forward to seeing you or having you at least electronically join us for our class next Tuesday as well. So